Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Lamentations, the second chapter. And as a continuation, we're still, pretty much going through as we're going to read. It's the lamenting, from the perspective of Israel going through this at this time, the destruction, right, that the Babylonians brought when they besieged Jerusalem. So I mean, a lot of it's really, not really much of a breakdown to it. It's more just mournings, and written in almost like a metaphorical, analogical, poetic way, but to emphasize the destitute state that our people were in at this time. So this is Lamentations chapter 2 verse 1. It says, "How hath the Lord covered the daughter of Zion with a cloud in his anger?" All right, and basically, or in other words, cast a shadow, or brought darkness upon Israel, and cast down from heaven onto the earth the beauty of Israel, right? And the beauty meaning like the lofty state that we were in when we were in the good graces of the Lord, and him casting us down from heaven to earth, meaning he brought us down to a low state. And remembered not his footstool in the day of his anger. And here the scriptures say, right, that the earth is the Lord's footstool, but in the earth you have a particular place where the Lord's presence was or is, or which is, as he chose in Israel. And so here, as it says, he remembered not his footstool in the day of his anger, basically to emphasize that when the Lord brought this wrath, it was as though he didn't even remember that we were, his people. We were that place he had chosen to put his name, because he was angry. Verse 2, "The Lord hath swallowed up all the habitations of Jacob, and hath not pitied. He hath thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah." Yeah, and so he overshadowed us, overtook us. And when it says the Lord has done this, it doesn't mean that the Lord came down physically himself and did all of these things. But what the Lord did was he raised up this other nation and weakened us and made us prey to this other nation. And so the damage that the other nation did was sanctioned by the Lord. Hence, you as we read, the credit is really being given to the Lord. He did this, he did that, he did this, but he did it by the hand of, in this case, the Babylonians and the nations that helped them. It says here, he hath not pitied, right? So there was no form of mercy in here, on the grand scale of the judgment that came, right? When you can read about it, right? Read about the fall or the siege of Jerusalem in not the one in 70 AD, but the one around 86 BC or 586 BC. And you'll see that they didn't stop at the wall, breaking down the walls. They burnt down the cities, killed people, took people captive, destroyed the temple, burnt the scrolls, all of those things, right? And the Lord allowed it to happen. Hence, that's why it's saying here, he hath not pity. He hath thrown down in his wrath the strongholds of the daughter of Judah. And, one thing about Jerusalem was it was a fortress, right? A defense city. And that's why even when we were trying to rebuild, in the process of rebuilding, the governors, right, under the Persians around that region wrote letters to the Persian king at the time, warning him that, hey, if you allow them to rebuild that temple and that city again, you're going to have trouble, because that was a defense city, and they were able to, they're known for being troublesome, people. Anyway, he hath brought them down to the ground, right, brought us to a low state. He hath polluted the kingdom and the princes thereof. And you go into that word polluted, basically to desecrate. And that's what he did. Right, the kingdom of Judah at this point, after this, there were no more, like the title of king. We didn't have that anymore, right? Because we were in captivity, under captivity, and that's why even when you go into the time of the New Testament, you really hear about like the high priest, right? And of course they appointed like the Herodians, but they weren't Israelites, right? And they had special connects to the Roman emperor and so on. So they had that luxury, but we didn't. Anyway, it says, he hath polluted the kingdom and the princes thereof. He hath cut off in his fierce anger all the horn of Israel. And the horn here represents our power. And when the Lord cut that off, it means that he took away our power and weakened us. He hath drawn back his right hand from before the enemy, right? Or in other words, he removed that hedge, that protection from us in the presence of the enemy, and allowed them to come in and take hold of, at this time, the kingdom of Judah. And he burned against Jacob like a flaming fire, and that which devoureth round about. So because of how angry the Lord was, when he unleashed his wrath, the destruction was likened unto like a raging fire that just burns everything in its path. He hath bent his bow like an enemy. He hath stood with his right hand as an adversary. Right? So the Lord started to come against us, to judge us as though it was an enemy. And I believe that's also in the book of Jeremiah as well, right? It says here, he stood with his right hand as an adversary, right? One that is against you, and slew all that were pleasant to the eye in the tabernacle of the daughter of Zion. He poured out his fury like fire. Yeah, so once again, this is something physically that was done by the troops, right? The soldiers of the Babylonian army, but here it was permitted, sanctioned, and allowed by the Lord. That's why it's saying that he did this, right? Verse 5, the Lord was as an enemy. He hath swallowed up Israel, he hath swallowed up all her palaces. Right? In other words, he overtook us, right? Like as if, imagine if you had like when a tsunami comes, right? And it just swallows up or just consumes or takes over everything in its path overwhelmingly. And that's what it felt like here during this time. No escape, no buildings, no people, no nothing was left untouched. He hath destroyed his strongholds, and hath increased in the daughter of Judah mourning and lamentation. And that's exactly what we're reading about here. So you can only imagine, right? And this wasn't the last time, because then again, during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, guess what? They did the same thing, came in there, pretty much left Jerusalem as like a wasteland. Obviously, it wasn't as, the temple wasn't like broken down and destroyed and burnt up like the Babylonians did, but there was still damage. Verse 6, and he hath violently taken away his tabernacle, as if it were of a garden. Now, when you read this part, as if it were of a garden, and some of these other translations, it's kind of like how, like, the Lord, this tabernacle, right, the temple, which was built, set up as the house of the Lord, with the significance and importance that it held, the Lord pretty much just destroyed it as if it was just like a garden shelter, like a fence around a garden or something. Okay, and he took it away violently because he allowed it to be destroyed and burnt. He hath destroyed his places of the assembly, right? And that's where we would gather, okay, whether it's for, a holy day, a particular sacrifice, whatever the case is. The Lord hath caused the solemn feasts and Sabbaths to be forgotten in Zion. So at this point, nobody was, weren't keeping these holy days. Everything was destroyed. It was broken down. And hath despised in the indignation of his anger the king and the priest. So the Lord didn't regard, the king. He didn't regard the priests. And the priests were the ones that did the offerings, right? They were the ones that were sanctified to handle the service and the ministering of the Lord's work. But in the day of his wrath, he didn't regard anybody. Just like in this time, if you're not of the elect, you're pretty much cooked. Verse 7, the Lord hath cast off his altar. He hath abhorred his sanctuary. He hath given up into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. Now, when it says he cast off his altar, he abhorred his sanctuary, it doesn't necessarily mean that the Lord, at all times, right? Like the concept of the sanctuary and the altar is like something that disgusts him. But it's just at this time, because of what Israel was doing, because of the iniquity that they did, they made the Lord to abhor and to be angry and to be in a state where he didn't even care about it anymore at that point, and he allowed it to be, just destroy the whole thing, because they've pretty much polluted it at this point. He hath given up into the hand of the enemy the walls of her palaces. They have made a noise in the house of the Lord Yahweh, as in the day of a solemn feast. So you can imagine them, the troops, finally breaking down the walls, scaling the walls, and then invading, killing whoever they see, right? And people are already weak at this point because of lack of food and starvation, and maybe even some infighting, right? So you can imagine these troops coming up in here, as they have refreshments and stuff during the siege. They come up in here, they go into the temple, they're ransacking, they're taking the gold, they're taking all these things, they're slaying the priests, right? Anybody that gets in their way, they're killing them. People are running around, and these troops, they're screaming, like that. When you know what it sounds like, right? If you don't, watch one of those ancient movies where they have like a siege or they have a war or an invasion or something like that. And that's why it says, as in the day of a solemn feast, as if this was a some festival that they had appointed, and they were, when people are at a festival, there's like, shouting and singing and loudness. Verse 8, the Lord hath purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. He hath stretched out a line. In other words, he measured it, right? So the Lord was deliberate. He, as it says, he purposed to destroy the wall of the daughter of Zion. So at this point, and you get a somewhat of a clearer picture when you read the book of Ezekiel as well, because the Lord really like explained and showed to Ezekiel why it is that he was getting ready to do what he did. So with all his intention, he intended for that destruction to go the way that it did. It says he hath not withdrawn his hand. So right, he stretched out a line. He measured, and once again metaphorically, but it's to say like how the Lord planned. He measured how the city, the walls, all of that, to destroy it. He hath not withdrawn his hand from destroying. So here's an example. You have somebody that is maybe they're like attacking somebody, right? Or they have an axe and they're like hitting something. If they withdraw their hand from doing it, that means they stop. So here what it's saying is the Lord didn't stop. He didn't stop the city from being destroyed. He didn't stop, the temple from being broken down. It was just straight destruction. Therefore, he made the rampart, which is like the fortress wall, and the wall to lament. They languished together. Obviously, this is metaphorical because the walls don't actually lament, right? But here is just to describe how, everything was just destroyed. Like the walls, the fortress, all that was weakened. It was broken down together. Her gates are sunk into the ground. He hath destroyed and broken her bars. So from this, you can start to picture, right, like a wasteland, like post-destruction, gates are broken down, walls are broken down, you have dust, you have some places maybe still on fire, dead bodies, okay, screaming, just agony, right? Her king and her princes are among the Gentiles. Yeah, because they took them captive, right? They remember when you read the book of Daniel and you even read in the book of Kings and so on, you get the context that before this destruction, there were a couple of rounds where Nebuchadnezzar had not just the nobility, but also those that were valuable in the land brought as captives to Babylon, and they could be of use to the Babylonians, right? Why just go and kill everybody if they have some pretty useful craftsmen, blacksmiths, carpenters, farmers, people that are wise, advisors? Bring them here and better your kingdom. That's pretty much what he did. As it says, they are among the Gentiles, right? Because they were taken captive. The law is no more. And this is why when you read in the book of 2nd Ezra, the 14th chapter, Ezra pleads with the Lord for the Lord to send the Spirit back, the Spirit into him, that he may, recount all that is written, so that those that would come after would have some record that could show them the way back. Because Ezra in his time, he could have taught the people, but as he mentioned, the law was burnt during this destruction. So as it says, the law is no more, both the physical laws, right, the writings, and also the adherence to it. Her prophets also find no vision from the Lord, right? Similar to how Saul was seeking, a message from the Lord, but at this point, the Lord just brought the judgment and pretty much left us in there. Verse 10, the elders of the daughter of Zion sit upon the ground and keep silence. They have cast dust upon their heads, which is a sign of mourning, right? Because of how bad things were. They have girded themselves with sackcloth. Once again, another sign of mourning. So in the ancient world, that's what they would do, right? When you were something bad happened, and you would mourn, you would put on sackcloth, you would cast dust upon your hair or upon your head. Okay, this was a sign of mourning back then. The virgins of Jerusalem hang down their heads to the ground, right, out of agony. Mine eyes do fail with tears. My bowels are troubled. My liver is poured upon the earth for the destruction of the daughter of my people. So this is describing like someone that is like, what's the word I'm looking for here? I can't find the word, but anyway, they're like weeping, nonstop, right? To the point where it's almost like they're running out of tears, and they're just like so winded, okay, because of how much sorrow, right, and mourning that they are in or going through, for the destruction of the daughter of my people, because the children and the sucklings swoon in the cities of the street. So you can imagine, right? And why are they swooning? Why are they weak? Why are they faint? No food, no water, no shelter, none of that. Everybody's just, out here struggling. And so you imagine seeing that. Verse 12, they say to their mothers, where is corn and wine? Right? They're basically asking for food. I'm hungry, like today. Thing is, even today you got food, but like let's say, you may be out in public and you may see that, right? Like a child starts crying to their mom because they're hungry, they want food, and the mom is like, okay, we're almost there. But in this case, there is no food, right? So it says here, when they swooned as the wounded in the streets of the city. So they were so hungry, asking, crying, begging for food, but there's nothing there, So you can imagine, as it says, they swooned. You can imagine some of them being, stooped over. When you don't eat for a while, it's hard to stand up straight, right? You're weak, you're fainting. Some of them probably passing out in the streets, as we're about to read, passing out. Some even dying, right, in their parents' arms and all of that, because children are more fragile, right? So if you as an adult can go longer without eating, however long you can go is less for your child, especially when they're young, right? As it says, the suckling children. It says here, when their soul was poured out into their mother's bosoms, right? So that's not a good experience. Imagine that, you being a mother and having to witness, your children dying and crying. And so that's why the book of Lamentations is written in such a way, because it was really that bad, when this was happening. What thing shall I take to witness for thee? What thing shall I liken to thee, O daughter of Jerusalem? Meaning, like, this is so bad. It's like, what can I even compare this to? That's how bad this is. What shall I equal to thee, that I may comfort thee? So what can I say? Oh, it's not that bad. Look, even such and such, this happened over here, or this was over here. There's nothing. O virgin daughter of Zion, for thy breach is great like the sea, Who can heal thee? And when you go into that word breach, it's pretty much like that, like a opening, right? Or in this case, it would be like this wound, right, that the Lord had brought upon us via this judgment. Now let's go into the word breach, right? Shabar. It says here breaking, fracture, crushing, shattering, ruin, right? So once again, just emphasizing this this calamity over here. For thy breach is great like the sea. Who can heal thee? Thy prophets have seen vain and foolish things for thee, and they have not discovered thine iniquity. Right. So the thy prophets, right, the false prophets, the job of a prophet is to come and give the people the message of the Lord. And most of the time when you read it, the point here was that they were calling out the people for their wickedness and the iniquity that they were committing, that the people would get right and repent. These false prophets here, as it says, they have seen vain and foolish things for thee, and have not discovered thine iniquity. So they haven't called you out in your iniquity, that you may be cut and repent and change from it. As it says, to turn away thy captivity, because had they done that, and had the people listened and obeyed, that captivity that just came upon us wouldn't have been the case. We wouldn't have had to face that judgment. It's like, for example, today people go to church and the pastors welcome sodomites, right? The pastors welcome, all these different people, of all these different lifestyles, and the pastor's well aware that these people are not living the ways according to what the Heavenly Father wants, but he tells them prosperity anyway, sells them a vain lie, right? A vain vision about how he sees good things in the future, and then bad things happen to them because he did not bring to light the things they were doing wrong, highlighted, and tell them they need to stop that. So what ended up happening? Not the vain vision that he saw, but rather the opposite, where calamity comes upon them, i.e. judgment, because of their iniquity. As it says, to turn away thy captivity, but have seen for thee false burdens and causes of banishment. See? So instead of of them seeing, the truth and bringing it out, they have, as it says, seen for thee false burdens and causes of banishment, because the things that they told the people by misleading them is what led to this, right? The banishment, the captivity, the destruction. All that pass by clap their hands at thee. They hiss and wag their head at the daughter of Jerusalem. And this is a form of, looking at us like in reproach. Like today, you imagine somebody walking by and seeing somebody else in a low state, and they're just like, look at that, shaking my head. That's how it would sound today, right? As it says, saying, is this the city that men call the perfection of beauty, the joy of the whole earth? And this is speaking in like this condescending, sarcastic way, right? Like, I thought these were supposed to be, the top of the top. What happened to that? What happened to being the God's chosen people, the special people over here? What happened? Look at you now. And this is the reaction that the neighboring, cities, the heathens, the nations were like, because remember that these were our adversaries. We came up in there, we took the land, we anybody that came against us while we were in line with our power, they got brought down. And remember, during the time of the reign of King David and King Solomon, we had them all under subjection unto us. So when they got the moment and they broke free and they saw us be brought down to this lower state, you can imagine, right? Verse 16, all thine enemies have opened their mouth against thee. They hiss and gnash the teeth. And what this means is they have us in reproach. They speak ill of us, right? They're joyful at the low condition that we were in. They say, we have swallowed her up. Certainly, this is the day that we looked for. So we're waiting on this. We have found, we have seen it. So it's kind of like when they say today somebody's praying on your downfall, right? Or you got haters, you know. Verse 17, the Lord Yahweh hath done that which he hath devised. He hath fulfilled his word that he commanded in the days of old. Right. So the Lord pretty much, as it says, he hath done that which he hath devised. So as the Lord had planned and even warned us about, said, hey, if you don't stop this, I'm going to do this. If you don't stop this, I'm going to do. And then, therefore, because you didn't do this, you didn't do that, this is what's going to come upon you. And then boom, this is what came upon us. And as it says, he commanded in the days of old, yeah, by way of his prophets. But what does it say in 2 Chronicles 36 and 16? They mocked the prophets and the messengers of God. He hath thrown down and hath not pitied, and he hath caused thine enemy to rejoice over thee. He hath set up the horn of thine adversary. So he raised up the power of our enemies that they could take us down, right? And not have pity upon us. Their heart cried unto the Lord, O wall of the daughter of Zion. Let tears run down like a river day and night. Give thyself no rest. Let not the apple of thine eye cease. So pretty much make supplication unto the Lord. Keep crying unto the Lord. Beg the Lord's mercy. As it says, let not the apple of thine eye cease. So don't give your eyes any rest. Continue to cry to the Lord, that hopefully he may look upon that and have mercy. Verse 19, arise, cry out in the night, in the beginning of the watches, pour out thine heart like water before the face of the Lord. Now, the watches, right? You have, I think it's 4 watches of the day and then of the night, right? So you have 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., the first watch, 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., the second watch, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m., third watch, and 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., the fourth watch. And then you have the night watches, right? Which is the same 4 again, but this time you're dealing in nighttime, right? But anyway, the point here that is being made is continue to cry out to the Lord, right? As it says here, let pour out thine heart like water before his face, or before the face of the Lord. Lift up thine hands toward him for the life of thy young children that faint for hunger in the top of every street. So as you see these children dying and so weak, and I mean, everybody's just going through it, cry unto the Lord, at least for their sake, that he may have mercy. But here's the fear of the Lord, right? When the Lord Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, commands us and tells us something and says, this is what I'm going to do if you don't stop, and you don't stop, and he brings that judgment, that's it. That judgment is here, and it's going to accomplish what he has set it to. That's why he's fearful, because if you don't listen and you get him to the point where he now makes that judgment call, there's no turning it back. And it doesn't matter what you do, how much you cry, what you say, what the Lord has decided and what he has purposed is what's going to happen. So when you deal with the Lord, you make sure you don't get him to that point. Don't, the saying, prevention is better than cure. With the Lord, prevention is the cure. You don't, especially when it comes to judgment. Don't wait till the judgment comes and try to find a way out of it, because it doesn't work that way. By the time the judgment reaches you, it has already been solidified in the spirit world from start to finish. So you are now experiencing the start of the judgment, but the judgment is a whole from beginning to the end. And it's not going to stop, because now that you started feeling it, now, oh Lord, I'm sorry. And if the Lord does have mercy, then it's because from the beginning, he had already planned to have mercy on you. Verse 20, behold, O Yahweh, and consider to whom thou hast done this. Shall the women eat their fruit, and the children of a span long? So now, see, the author here, right, or in this case, we, right, in the perspective of Israel, is begging the Lord, right, appealing to his mercy and his pity, to say, Lord, remember, consider who you're doing this to. This is us, your chosen people. Are you going to allow, as it says, the women to eat their own fruit, to eat their own children? That's what their fruit is, right? If you look at the concept of a fruit is the offspring of a tree, just like the fruit of a woman would be their child. It says, and children of a span long, right? So, basically little children, babies, pretty much, because that's what was happening because of the lack of food. Then just imagine realistically how bad it has to get for mothers to eat their children. That's crazy. Like, you're eating another human being, yeah, and worst of all, your own child. Shall the priest and the prophet be slain in the sanctuary of the Lord? So, Lord, like, is this, you're just gonna allow this? Women to eat their own children, and we're your chosen people. Your priests and prophets to be slain in the temple, in the sanctuary. The young and old lie on the ground in the streets. My virgins and my young men are fallen by the sword. Right? So they're killed, they're slain. Thou hast slain them in the day of thine anger. Thou hast killed and not pitied. Thou hast called as in a solemn day my terrors round about. So it's like the Lord has assembled the terrors, okay, and the judgments around us as likened unto calling an assembly in a solemn day, or in a holy day, or on a feast day. So that in the day of the Lord Yahweh's anger, none escaped nor remained. So everybody that the Lord had set up to be slain with the sword, to die of starvation, to die of pestilence, whatever it means, nobody escaped. Of course, this doesn't mean that everybody died in the siege. No, so a lot of people did, but some were taken captives and some were left in the land. Those that I have swaddled and brought up hath mine enemy consumed. So the pretty much your offspring, your children, have now been the victims of this adversarial nation that came and had no pity. And now the people and the land and everything is now destroyed. It's gone. It's in an unimaginable situation. And in a case like this, you think, like, how and where do we even begin to come back? But anyway, that brings us to the end of Lamentations, the 2nd chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. And in closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodesh. And until next time, Shalom.